And together, we will move mountains. And if they don't hear our message, then we'll just do it over and over and over and over 1,000 times again for you.
And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up in spite of you. I will rise, we will rise, we will rise, we will rise.
Hello, my name is Michelle Zabel and my pronouns are she and her. I'm an assistant dean at the University of Maryland School of Social Work and the proud director of the Institute for Innovation and Implementation. Today, I'm just delighted to welcome you to this Training Institute live workshop. As you might have come to expect with all your favorite conferences, the Training Institutes are now virtual. And although I know we'd all like to be together in person, we are excited to host the Virtual Training Institutes and really want to encourage you to continue to join us on the first Thursday of every month through August. Each month, you'll have a choice of 2 back-to-back workshops. So mark your calendars, choose your workshops, and make sure you reserve your place early so that you can attend the workshop that most interests you. Today, I want to encourage you to actively participate by using the chat to post your questions, post your comments, and share your resources with your colleagues. Our presenters, they definitely want to hear from you. And it is absolutely your participation that will make each of these sessions a success. As a reminder, staff are monitoring the chat and they're going to make sure the facilitators see your questions and comments, so be sure and engage. A few other reminders to include: if you need assistance at any time navigating through these virtual spaces or accessing links to workshops, we do have a live help desk support standing by to assist. We are also providing a certificate of attendance after the completion of each workshop, and all of our workshops are being recorded, so by you participating, you're implying consent. Finally, there will be an ASL interpreter or closed captioning available during each workshop. Those interpreters can be pinned when available for those who require interpretation by hovering over the interpreter's video and selecting the 3 dots. One of the options that will appear is pin video. By selecting the pin video, this video will not move out of view. With our theme, What Could Be? Bolder Systems and Brighter Futures for Children, Youth, Young Adults, and their Families, all of our sessions will challenge us to envision a future where the voices of children, youth, young adults, and their families are elevated, especially those who are most frequently silenced or marginalized, where we use the best data and research available to challenge ourselves, developing new ideas and approaches that can be implemented to meet the needs of youth and families, and in service of our commitment to social justice and the elimination of disproportionality and disparities. My hope is that today's session will provide you with food for thought as you consider your next steps in creating a vibrant, equitable future for youth with complex needs and their families. Please don't forget to register for next month's workshop. Remember, they're held the first Thursday of every month, and you can visit the institute.umaryland.edu for the full schedule. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next month.
Next.
Good afternoon. This is Sue Smith, and I'm the CEO of the Georgia Parent Support Network, Georgia's Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health. Thank you, Training Institutes, for having us this afternoon. Our organization has been around for 30 plus years, and we've been on the path of peer support and peer empowerment for all of those years. Together with us today is Dante McKay, the Director of the Office of Children, Youth, and Families, Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, one of our treasured partners and strategist, and all of the good words that you could use for somebody who's an excellent partner in furthering what has been for all these many years a work in progress. You'll hear a lot about that this afternoon. And Cameron Cochran, I don't even know how long he's been one of our peer youth, but he was one of our peer youth before peer youths were peer youths, right? There was nothing written up, no rules, no regulations when Cameron came to us. And he's been with us now, I believe, almost half his life in one form or another. And you're going to hear some great stuff about the evolution of him being one of the first certified peer specialists and what that's meant to him and the system. Next.
Thank you, Sue. Today you'll hear about peer support in Georgia. More specifically, we'll discuss peer support as a Medicaid billable service, peer support policies, the certification process for peer support specialists, the importance of peer support, the role of peer support in the Georgia System of Care expansion project, and providing peer support in the current context. Next. Before we get too far into it, I wanted to give you a brief lay of the land of the child serving agency landscape in Georgia. There are 8 child serving agencies. My agency, the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities, DBHCD for short, the Department of Community Health, which is our Medicaid authority, the Department of Early Care and Learning, the Department of Education, the Department of Human Services, which includes the Division of Children and Family Services, the Department of Juvenile Justice, the Department of Public Health, and the Georgia Vocational Rehabilitation Agency. And so in navigating the system, parent and youth certified peer specialists help to assist individuals to better learn how to navigate these 8 child serving agencies. Next.
Peer support is a billable, Medicaid billable service. This is one of the things that we didn't start off for. It was years ago, but it's one of the things that just actually happened as the land changed and the services changed and healthcare systems evolved. Next. Peer support as a Medicaid billable service led the way in Georgia. As you can see listed below, Georgia was the first state to bill Medicaid for peer services in 1999. That was peer services mental health, and those are adult persons who have chosen this path as being certified peer specialists. First state to expand Medicaid coverage to include additional recovery and whole health certified peer specialist, addictive diseases, certified peer specialist youth, CPSY, CPSP, Medicaid bill in 2017. So you see there's been a few years in between some of this stuff. Certified peer specialist mental health, whole health, CPS mental health, whole health. Certified peer specialist mental health and forensics. Georgia model becomes the basis for 40 states and dozens of countries to adopt mental health peer support. And if you think about that and the domino effect, as I often do, we'll never know how many people are being served and helped and supported through these services. Next.
This slide is a visual of what Sue just shared with you all. And essentially, peer support dates back, as mentioned, to 1999, when the first service was able to be billed. In 2001, Georgia rolled out the Adult Mental Health Certification Program. In 2007, added the wellness elements to peer support. And Georgia was approved for a PRTF demonstration waiver for parent and youth peer support. So it started as part of our high fidelity wraparound. Along those same lines, in 2010, Georgia received a Medicaid CHIPPR grant to further develop parent and youth peer support. In 2012, Georgia received Medicaid approval for peer support, whole health, and addictive disease peer support. And then in 2017, our state plan amendment was approved to add youth and parent peer support as a Medicaid billable service. I have the honor of presenting on this today, but I'm standing on the shoulder of giants. In addition to Sue, there are many others that have championed this work in Georgia over the years. Some of those include Wendy White Tigerine, Don Morgan, Monica Johnson, Dana McQuarrie, and Tony Sanchez. Next.
Okay. In this slide, these are the different types of peer certifications. First, you have the certified peer specialist on mental health, and it covers exactly what it says, the mental health aspect of it. And as you see, the age range is, 18 and older. And next, you have the peer specialist addictive diseases, for like anything like dealing with any addictive substances. And the age requirement for that would be 18 and older. And next you have the certification for the peer certification for youth, which the age ranges for this is 18 through 30, but like approaching 26 is when you're able to, go into like the aspect of, treat like helping assist individuals and ones who suffer like from the same as being towards youth as well. And next you have the certified peer specialist for parents. Those are including like parents or guardians that are experienced in dealing with a youth that is that may have a mental health diagnosis or substance abuse or co-occurring as well. And if everyone can see in all like everything for us, all the certifications, one thing that they have in common is among getting the certification, you also, everyone have in common of helping an individual such as like anyone who's experienced in anything that particular to what you're experienced in your past, or dealing with children with mental health or diagnosis with other as well. So that's one thing that they have in common. Next. And these for these type of certifications here, the ancillaries CPS credentials, these is basically like enhancing your skills for mental health and whole health and mental health and forensics. Next.
This graphic represents the number of certified peers that have been individuals certified in the state of Georgia. The work is led by the Office of Recovery Transformation. There are 5 divisions within DBHCD, so our state agency. And within the Behavioral Health Division is where the Office of Recovery Transformation sits, along with a couple other offices, Adult Mental Health, Office of Addictive Diseases, and my office, the Office of Children, Young Adults, and Families. And so the Office of Recovery Transformation, working in collaboration with those other offices, are helping to recruit, train, and grow the CPS Guild in Georgia. Next. This slide represents peer-specific services or services that are specifically offered by peers. There are many, but just to kind of name a few, the Peer Warm Line, peer mentors at state hospitals and prisons, and then peer support in hospital emergency departments. Next. And this slide represents comprehensive treatment and supports. And so where the previous slide was peer-specific services, in this instance, peers are a member of the treatment team. You'll see many services represented here, but just to highlight a few: high fidelity wraparound, AKA in Georgia, intensive customized care coordination, or IC3 for short, crisis stabilization programs, and family training. Next. This slide, I guess I should start by saying interest in certified parent and youth peers is very high in Georgia presently. And so I use this slide when I'm talking to groups to kind of educate on, in my opinion, the 3 buckets to kind of grow and sustain the work. And so today you're hearing largely about the Medicaid medicatability of the service. But there are other ways to offer peers, outside of Medicaid. And so the first bucket you need is funding. So we amended our state Medicaid plan to add it to make it a sustainable Medicaid billable service. But for individuals, say a school district, they may want to offer peers and they may not be set up for Medicaid. There's a way to support those salaries through personnel funding in the same way that you would any other position. Or it could be a combination of the two. Some Medicaid billings and some state funding or other like grant funding to support those positions. The second category relates to capacity. Ongoing recruitment, ongoing training, certification, continued education. In the same way you would any other position. There's a lot of churn. People come in, they move on, they stay for, various points in time. And so these efforts have to be continuous. And then the third relates to enrollment. So for the individuals, to make sure that they are enrolled in the service and receiving peer support, that it's included in their individual recovery or resiliency plans. Next. Next. And so this slide represents the DBHDD provider manual. These services are represented in our community manual, which you can find on our website at the link highlighted below. And the service guidelines are organized into, these areas. So billing codes and rates, there's a service definition, admission criteria, continuing stay criteria, and discharge criteria. And then both are offered in two modalities. So you have individual peer support and then group peer support for both parent and youth. Next slide.
DBHDD policy 15-150, recovery, wellness, and independence. Nobody will ever know how many hours of conversation came into play coming up with this this particular slide that you're about to see now. A group of people got together called the GRI, Georgia Recovery Initiative, and we worked and we recruited people and we expanded and we worked and we debated and we changed words and we worked for a very long time. I don't know how long, it seemed like forever to me. And in the end, this is the statement that we came up with. People would say, well, what about this? Or what about that? Or what about the other? And we would be almost there and a new person would join the group and say, well, you haven't thought about this angle of it. So DBHDD recognizes that all people, regardless of their challenge, can build resilience, independence, and wellness to enjoy a life well lived. These broad concepts include principles of individual self-determination, freedom, and personal responsibility, and are considered key to achieving the goals of satisfying independent life with dignity and respect for everyone. I actually love that. I mean, because I was there for the very most of the discussions, and I know all the heartfelt thoughts that go into it. Dante?
Thank you, Sue. And so as you heard, the community, our stakeholders, the advocates, the peers and families, they created this and the department adopted it and put it into policy. And the way that process goes just outside of this particular policy, but there is a sponsor, there is a group here that kind of reviews those and then they get published. And so this one got published as is. And what's significant about this policy is the sponsor was our commissioner. The department highly values lived experience in peers. And so she put her name on this one. And it's been, public and available for at least a couple years now. Next.
So next, we're going to talk about DBHDD Policy 15-150, Recovery, Wellness, and Independence. This is the guiding principles and values. At least as much time after we got the definition went into what it would mean for people. And one of the cool things about today is you have all of the history from a perspective, totally different perspectives. Mine from the beginning, Dante from the person who's been around almost all of the time for the policy 15-150, but not all the time. And Cameron, who's been through it from a whole different perspective. So you're actually looking at all of this from three very different lenses, which I think is very interesting. And I think you'll get a lot more out of it that way, because we will all be able to show you what it looks like from all aspects of the people that you're working with or living with or recovering with. The wellness, recovery, and recovery, wellness, and independence, and the guiding principles were another thing that was discussed a lot. Convey the hope of recovery, informed by wisdom of lived experience, address trauma. Recovery occurs via many pathways, empower communities, support self-responsibility based on respect, person-driven, strength-based, age-independent, holistic, supported by peers, allies, advocates, families, nurtured through relationships, and social networks, culturally based and influenced and anchored in wellness. And the more I read those, the more potential I see for ways to help people. And I really, really, really hope that you do too. Next slide.
And so, as you heard with the last two slides, so the department relies on a combination of service guidelines, which are published in our community provider manuals and policies. And, all of those you can find on the DBHD website, dbhd.ga.gov, and you can either click on community manuals or you can click on policies and plug in those numbers and they'll pull it up. And so there was the work of, peer support. There was the work of defining it in a way that we had previously defined other kind of treatment services. So in service guidelines and in policies, to try to capture it and communicate those values and principles that Sue just covered. Now, this policy concerns the training and certification of peer specialists. And DBHD is the sole certifying body for that work in Georgia. And so what that policy spells out is the different peer specialist practitioner types that Cameron covered a little earlier, states that we're the sole certifying body. It requires that peers gain certification and maintain that certification through continued education. It lists out the core competencies. So each of the practitioner types are unique, but there are core competencies that are shared across all of those practitioner types. Next. And so, as mentioned, DBHD is the sole certifying body, but we work with 3 training vendors to provide the certification and continue education training. And so those 3 include Georgia Mental Health Consumer Network. And so they manage the CPS mental health training, CPS mental health and whole health, and the CPS mental health and forensics. Our second training vendor is the Georgia Council on Substance Abuse, and they manage the CPS addicted disease peer certification training. And then our newest member, and you'll hear more about that, is Georgia Parent Support Network in terms of being the training body for parent and youth certified peer. Sue, anything you'd like to add to that?
It's been a long road for each of the guilds. And the thing that Dante said that I have not said yet, and I think I want to put it in here, is that when you hear about this work, every single piece of it has been informed by community leaders, by persons in recovery, although that was not the word we used way back when. It's been informed by a group of people who met at 18 months, one Saturday a month for 5 to 6 hours, developing what this would look like. People who in the beginning wrote manuals and community people, not talking about all the government agencies you've heard about. So this has been a true collaboration, partnership, and work in progress since the very beginning, over 20 years ago. And I can't stress enough that many of our leaders who started it back then are no longer here. And still their work goes on. And some that took us miles in learning and understanding and credibility in the community. So if you're people thinking about doing this kind of work or expanding or changing what you're doing, I would say the partnership between community and government bodies or agencies or certifying bodies is absolutely, absolutely critical. Next.
And so a couple slides back, I mentioned the core competencies. And so there are 3 that DBHD adopted that were shared by CMS many years back. And those 3 are care coordination, recovery support, and person-centered training. But then there are 14 additional core competencies that DBHD developed as a part of our policy. Next. And this slide represents the 14. And so they focus on the CPS role and responsibility, an orientation and a recovery definition, effectively using personal recovery stories to benefit the individual served, focus on listening, self-disclosure, and engagement. As my colleague Dana McQuarrie often says, we listen, we don't fix people. Creating environments that support recovery, ethics and professional boundaries, combating negative self-talk, workplace power, conflict and integrity, recovery-oriented goal setting, change facilitation, self-care and wellness, advocacy, documentation, including the individual recovery and resiliency plan and progress notes, and then that testing process. So you go through a certification class, and then there's a test at the end. And for individuals that pass the test, they are certified peer specialists. And then at least once a year, they're required to gain 12 hours of continued education hours to maintain that certification. Next. So we had talked about the 3 training vendors or partners. And this is a visual representation of the 3. And Sue and Cameron will talk more about the evolving, developing work with Georgia Parent Support Network. Next.
Georgia Parent Support Network is transitioning to the role of the change agent for the certification of the CPSPs and Ys. In early 2021, GPSN, building on the work of the AIM grant, will pilot trainings that will be delivered in rural regions of Georgia, specifically regions 4 and 5. And Georgia Parent Support Network has been collaborating with the AIM System of Care Expansion Grant for over a year and has successfully established chapters of the Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health and engaged parents. In each region, these parent partnerships will serve as a foundation for GPSN-led training. I could talk a lot about that one because the first training is next Monday. It's based, I'm sorry?
Which I'm a part of.
Right, but Cameron said, which he's a part of. Yes, he will get his training in this one because Cameron is also, in addition to being a youth specialist, a parent. And so he's looking forward to being a CPSP. So I want to talk a minute about a long road. We have been in training for this for years. And we're having, and again, it would be remiss not to talk about Dana McQuarrie. She has been gracious and helpful and wonderful in transferring this and helping us figure out what to do. You know, it's been a long road. I couldn't do this without saying Matt's name. He's the person in charge of AIM for DBHDD, and he has been more than gracious. And the partnership is going well. The expansion into the communities in Georgia is going well. Our first class was a class that was already formed before we got to COVID, right? Before it got to us. And so that will be the first training that we will do. And after that, we will move into South Georgia first with the AIM grant and start training in communities with a lot of community input. And we're looking forward to seeing how that works and what it looks like. I'm very excited about it. Cameron, did you want to say something?
Oh, yes. Like you were saying, just to reiterate, like it has been a long road, because I was one of the first graduation classes with certified peer specialists for youth. And I remember, like, before it was like, you know, established, it was like a group of youth. Like, I think nobody was in that room with, like, you know, under the age, I mean, was older than the age of 18. And as youth, like, we sat there and we established, like, what should, you know, the training look like, what parts, like, felt comfortable, like, and, you know, the different aspects of how, like, the overall training should look for, like, youth like ourselves. And that's what I found, like, you know, the most astonishing part, you know, adults coming together, like, to bring youth the part of the table to see, you know, get their suggestions and what something should look like, instead of, you know, taking initiative and, like, just thinking of it may be something, like, instead of doing that, you know, you bring you to the table. That was, like, the most astounding part to me amongst the journey.
Next.
This slide was populated by federal data. If your state is like our state, then I'm willing to bet that you're experiencing a mental health professional shortage. And Georgia has 159 counties, second only to Texas. In the areas that you see represented in gray are areas that have adequate mental health professionals. The areas in green are underserved in terms of the number of mental health professionals that are available. And so one of the things that we are careful with, because of this, sometimes the community would like peers in the place of mental health professionals. And you have to just be careful with that. In some instances that is appropriate, but in other instances, peers work as a part of the treatment teams. Next slide.
Family recovery is possible. Organizational family recovery. Family recovery, you see in your little circles, parent peer support, youth peer support, treatment team support. So I think what this one is saying is that it's bigger than it used to be when my Danny was getting services 30 plus years ago. It's more comprehensive. It's a team approach, it's community approach. And we're not completely there yet, but we certainly are further along than we used to be, and we're on the right road. And I think the foundation for that is it's a conversation now. Almost nothing changes that impacts family and youth services without family and youth at the table saying what they think will help, the opinions are valued as we move forward. Cameron, did you want to say something about this one?
Yes, like that's like a major part of it, because I like the fact that, you know, addressing the youth's challenges, it's a major part of it, but it's also another major part, you know, to, you know, integrate the family as well. So that's one of the reasons. I don't want to get too far into it to get ahead of myself.
Okay.
Next.
Family recovery. The child is not singular. The child is part of a family unit, no matter the nature of the family. Recovery then for the child is for the child and family. I think we would all agree about that. So, and families come in all different configurations. I think that one of the biggest challenges for us in our work, and we were one of the first family support organizations, and that meant that we got to hire the peers that were first certified and to kind of be a contractor and supporter for them as they went into the communities. was the many different variations and configurations of family and how to be sure that we were sensitive to every and all needs without judgment, even as other family members. So everyone in the family can contribute, particularly in family recovery, building hope within the entire family, helping the family become more educated on behavioral health and related support skills, be specific to the child's needs, make it personal. Everyone in the family needs some degree of accommodation, flexibility, and support. Promote a healthy journey, build connections, improve connections, bolstering unity and wellness. And, you know, as we go along, another thing that I would like for everybody to consider, because it's one that we don't talk about very much, but it's incredibly important in our everyday work at Georgia Parent Support Network, is consider that different groups of people have different methods of dealing with their family or interacting with their family. And, you know, it's, I don't know if I'm being really plain about this, but all things we think don't fit all families. We have to be really able to take the family recovery and adapt it to each individual family rather than the set of things we're going to do with everybody. It doesn't quite work that way. Next.
And so this slide represents really two areas: formal peer support and informal peer support. And so in my job, I spend a lot of time talking about sustainability. For those that talk to me often, I'm pretty sure they're tired of hearing me talk about sustainability. But we want to make sure that this service is available today and long into the future. And so sustainability has to be a part of the conversation. And so when you talk about sustainability, that gets into that finance piece. So it gets into the Medicaid. And in order to build Medicaid, that top bar is here represented as formal peer support. And so there has to be a mental health diagnosis. The individual has to be receiving services from a approved enrolled provider with DBHTD. Peer support must be included in their individual recovery or resiliency plan. And then it has to be authorized by our administrative service organization. That is not the only way to get peer support. You know, again, there are organizations, Sue just mentioned, you know, being a family-run organization, there are peer-run organizations throughout the state. And so there are various funding mechanisms that they utilize as people walk through their door to provide peer support. So the informal versus formal kind of gets into, you know, building Medicaid or supporting that work with some other fund source. And then this also kind of relates to what I talked about many slides back in terms of there are many other partners in the state. So child welfare, education, school districts that are interested in utilizing peers. And we have been encouraging them to think about supporting those positions with, you know, personnel dollars in the same way that they would other positions if they're not able to build Medicaid or, you know, receive grant dollars for those positions. Next.
Impact of peer support services. Other outcomes: hard to reach, engaged, individuals are more involved in their services, employment, housing, provider relationships, quality of life, child welfare. And then on the other hand, substance use, emergency department visits, inpatient days, rehospitalizations, reincarcerations, child welfare involvement for youth, and the cost of services. The impact of peer support services is huge. I think on the upside, all of the things of the hard to reach, involved employment, housing, relationships is absolutely right. And what I believe we're seeing substantially is less substance use, fewer emergency department visits, inpatient days, rehospitalizations, reincarceration, child welfare involvement, and cost of services. So in this slide, there are no downsides to using peer support services. On the other side, probably not the side that most people would think about, but from the family side, the impact is you're never alone again. You don't have to suffer by yourself. You've got people to call, and that's huge. That's absolutely huge. You make new friends. You get a lot of information about how to, schools are not specifically mentioned on here, but it's huge too, about how to navigate your schools or the laws about how to your rights, or there are any number of things that come with peer support, either directly or as a matter of being of the team that the peer support keeps you in. And in the evolution of this, I watched more people stay in treatment with their team and make their appointments than ever did before. So to me, that's a huge thing. This peers serve as kind of a stabilizer for the family so that they can accept the services they're being offered, or they're more likely to come back. And my family lived through some of this before there were nearly as many services, and it surely does work. Cameron?
Yes, like it's the impact of it is I feel that, you know, with my lived experience of what I went through, like I noticed things like what I figured I needed growing up, and the support factor is like a part of, you know, why I entered the field, because I can address, you know, situations like, you know, understanding where they may be coming from. Although, you know, I don't come from the same exact background, like I can, you know, correlate some parts of my story with, you know, how an individual may be feeling or going through. Next.
One of the primary functions of the parent and youth peer support service is to promote family youth recovery, making a connection, addressing isolation, building knowledge and skills, and cultivating hope. The focus of parent and youth CPSs. I think all of that was kind of what I was just talking about. The primary function of the parent youth peer support services. Recovery is a huge word, and when you looked at all the things we talked about a while ago that it covers, it can take many different forms for many different people. And I think that one of the big challenges and one of the big benefits of the training that we're receiving, which is well thought out by a lot of people, is that we really learn how to address each of these on a personal basis with people. It's not a one size fits all like so much of our previous treatment had been. Cameron?
Yeah, like that's one of the, you know, important things of being like a CPS, whether it's a parent or a youth, like, you know, making that connection, like that's, you know, the key part of, you know, what we do is our lived experience, and we can use that to, you know, address some of the things that this slide shows, like making the connection, addressing isolation, and building the knowledge and skills, and, you know, creating hope for that individual or that family. Next. All right, parent and youth CPS aim. We support increased advocacy, help improve common communications within the family. We reduce crisis, help families learn to, you know, de-escalate potential crisis situations, establish meaningful community connections, and enhance quality of life in communities, and cultivate self-efficacy. And basically this slide is like, you know, as a CPSP or why, like our job, Mr. McKay was saying earlier, like Miss Dunn was saying, you know, we don't fix people, like, and it's a part of, you know, what we've been through to, you know, participate and try to assist families and youth, and, you know, ultimately, you know, being self-efficient to the point where, like, hey, they can take the tools that they've learned through trainings, correlating stories, and, other avenues to, work out situations that may arise and notice when there's going to be a crisis situation and what they have to do to, avoid that.
Cameron, as I watch this slide, I think about you and the years I've known you in your life. And I would add one down at the bottom, and that would be, and I don't know exactly what we call it, but it would be that we help people to better be able to take advantage of the opportunities in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've known Cameron since he couldn't see the opportunities, and I've seen him realize using these tools, the possibilities. So in the end of the day, I think that all of this is aimed toward giving people the skills to see above and beyond the written word, their own, helping them to actualize their own journey.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide. Next. Supports and interventions. Blue box, drawing upon your own experiences, helping the family and youth find and maintain hope as a tool for progress toward recovery. Encouraging the creation of an ongoing wellness and maintenance plan. Assisting the family in identifying the tools of wellness and resiliency recovery available in everyday life. Identify the importance of self-care. Create early access to the messages of recovery and wellness, identifying and overcoming their fears, building the youth and family skills and knowledge, tools related to identified conditions, related symptoms, triggers so that the family youth can assume the role of self-motivating and self-maintenance. Kind of what I was talking about, but maybe one step not quite as far. If you think about this in terms of the work you do every single day, we can provide a lot of things. It's all spectrums of service. But unless we can have people willing, ready, and able to hear what we're saying, continue to receive our service so that they actually can help get into recovery for themselves and their families, it doesn't work. And I think these are the tools, supports, and intervention that kind of are the glue to everything else and really make it work. Cameron?
Oh, you took everything I was gonna say, Miss Sue. But yeah, that's these are some of the supports and interventions, and you just use use the skills that you taught, and one of the things with Continue Ed, it teaches you can never get rid of any skills, because it's always preparing you for extra steps and helping others. One of the reasons for the Continue Ed.
Next, please. CPS is going to assist with encouraging personal responsibility, building empowerment and self-determination, assisting others in skill buildings and problem solving, building self-directed recovery tools, establishing personal health directives, and making informed decisions, and so much more. Every single one of these is bringing to mind people that we have really that have been in our program, and we have watched grow and to gain these skills. We can help with this and so much more, but I think the key is that we become the listening ear. We become the person who understands some of the struggles we're hearing. And we do it from a non-professional, although professional in our own way, but a non-medical kind of assessment. So I think that that's really important. Cameron?
Mm-hmm. For as just in assistant period, I'm sure everybody will notice a theme going on here for the next few slides, which is continuously throughout. CPS is the basis is to assist, you're working on your recovery while you've accepted your challenge, and you gain the knowledge and skills to help someone else that you notice that's out there trying to seek the same help that you seek, and you want to, basically put them in a better spot to, better themselves. Next.
And yes, that's my dog in the background. Sorry, he is locked up.
Okay, CPSs can assist with identifying other community and individual supports that can be used by the family, families to achieve their goals and objectives. These can include friends, relatives, and or religious affiliations. Coaching parents in developing system advocacy skills in order to take a proactive role in their own treatment, and to obtain information and advocate with all youth serving systems. Assisting the families in understanding various systems, processes, how these relate to the youth recovery process and their value roles. Crisis planning, individualized recovery, resiliency planning, also known as the IRP process. Now, with this, and this is another step, I've been discussing about, how CPSs assist families, but at the same time, I don't want everyone to feel like, you have to know it all. And that's the main part of the first portion of this, teaching how to identify other resources and community affiliations to help with certain things. Because, like I said, we don't know it all. So it's best, you reach out to, if that family is religious, you reach out to their, religious affiliations, or, different organizations that can help with different things. Like some families may need food distribution, houses, mental health services, and it's best to, understand those different avenues so you can better assist that family. Ms. Sue, you have anything?
Sorry, I'm muted because of the dog. Deborah, I agree with you. One of the comments in the comment box was that Deborah likes this peer thing. I like this peer thing a lot. And we've probably done it about as long as anybody in the United States. Our peer center is over 20 years old. So we've lived through all the different standardizations of the things we always did. And I still think when we think with families, I'm going to go back to the old piece of this: no eject, no reject, and nothing about us without us. We have, for all of these years, had our peers operate within the confines of the best we can, that philosophy. And it's kind of like this: you try to figure out what people need and you try to meet the need. And I'm going to say that, just personal experience on this, it's better not to hire just one of anybody, not just one CPS or one CPSY. We're better if we have other people to support us and collaborate with us and that have the same shared experiences. Rather than looking at everything that Cameron talked about and read. There's so much collaboration with a family is so important, and talking to them and identifying with them when you can and supporting them in all kinds of different ways. Next.
This slide asks and answers the important question: why are peer support services important? If you look at this graphic, you'll see behavioral is the largest contributing factor of health and well-being. And that's what, peers tap into. They're able to connect with individuals in meaningful ways, in ways that clinicians or paraprofessionals don't always connect. And so just to kind of share a story, a couple of years back, I was able to observe a focus group with one of our providers. And the researcher was asking, in your opinion, I can't remember the question exactly, but it was something along the lines of, does peer support work? And the person's response was emphatically yes. And the provider said, when we're working with the youth, we could tell youth to do something over and over and over and over again, and nothing seems to change. But if I tell a certified youth specialist, hey, I need, can you share such and such with little Johnny? And the certified peer specialist says it's a little Johnny, the response is just totally different. And so in working with certified youth peer specialists, we've been able to experience a lot of breakthroughs. Again, this is the provider talking to the researcher and me being a fly on the wall. And so, that for me, that captured it in a nutshell. And this slide is a good representation of why it's so important to support those behavioral health needs. Next. Earlier, Sue mentioned the Georgia AIM project. I may have also mentioned that. And so AIM is our latest SAMHSA System of Care Expansion Grant. And AIM stands for Awareness, Integration, Mobilization, Education. Next. Before we talk about one of the goals of AIM and how it relates to parent, youth, peer specialists, a little background would be helpful. And so what you're looking at here is a representation of the formal system of care infrastructure in the state of Georgia. And so system of care for Georgia is two things. It is a framework that SAMHSA created and has evolved over the last 30 years. And then it is the application of that framework to create and maintain a formal system of care in the state of Georgia. And so what you see are bodies represented in Georgia law, informed by system of care values and principles. And so at the, starting bottom and working my way up, you have local interagency planning teams. I'll say a little bit more about that shortly. Then you have the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council, which think about all the commissioners. It's always chaired by the commissioner of my agency, so the behavioral health, and the interagency directors team is a formal work group, the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council. And all of these groups have representation from all child serving agencies, including many child serving focused nonprofit organizations and organizations like Georgia Parent Support Network. So it's not just the agencies getting together monthly and planning, state agencies getting together monthly and planning. It is a collective that includes public, private, nonprofit that get together to implement Georgia's System of Care State Plan. And then the behavioral health or the chair of the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council, of course, reports to the governor. So ideally, or the intent of this was to make sure that practice reflects policy and that policy reflects practice all the way from the practice level through the governor's office. Next. So the local interagency planning teams, part of that pyramid, or LIPTs for short, has permanent members that include the mental health agency, child welfare, juvenile justice, public health, education, and vocational rehabilitation. And really, it's 130 throughout Georgia. They meet, various schedules, but their purpose is to meet in order to wrap around services for youth that are in danger of being removed from the home, or to support youth that are soon to return to the community. They may be about to be discharged from crisis stabilization or PRTF, psychiatric residential treatment facility. Next. And so what AIM does is there's a project that AIM is piloting that focuses on LIPTs. And so again, I'm gonna reference my colleague, Dana McQuarrie. So I'd like to say I try to lean on lived experience as much as I lean on all the books that I read in my educational pursuits. But one of the things that Dana taught me is that sitting in a LIPT meeting across the table from those 6 child serving agencies that are about to try to decide the fate of your child and your family is a pretty intimidating thing. And with that realization, that led us to want to explore adding or offering youth and parent peers to those LIPT meetings, not just during, but prior to kind of advise and guide and coach families and to provide support during those meetings and after those meetings. And so Matthew Clay, my colleague, leads that work and partners with a few partners, including Sue and Georgia Parent Support Network. Sue?
What I would say about this is you've described it really well. And Dana describes it really well. And it was my kid. It wasn't, the names have changed, but it was the same agencies in the same places a very long time ago. And I would cry before I went to the meetings, and I couldn't walk in, and I would shake, and I would say things like, I think you ought to teach her to read too. And so one day we came upon this strategy. So we got one of our parents and we dressed her up really well, and we gave her a briefcase, and we told her not to say anything except, what do you think your child should need? Or things like that. And so we took her to the meetings, and they thought she was a lawyer, and things improved greatly. Just saying. Little strategy that we used back in the day. Now I want to talk about AIM a little bit. AIM is like an amazing thing. When we actually got the AIM grant, we were actually delayed in implementing it. So it took a little while to start implementing it, but when it was started, my view was most of the training for the CPSPs and Ys was centralized in Atlanta, and I'm from the country of South Georgia. And so it would have been very hard for me to attend an Atlanta meeting when I needed it a long time ago. Of course, it didn't exist then either. But our vision is that we will use the AIM project, and Matt and the AIM project have worked really closely with us for about 1.5 years to kind of take this back to the community, or take it to the community for the first time, and base it strongly on our LIPTs and, you know, all of the other existing structures, and try to recruit community people from the communities they live in, for the service systems they have, and provide training individualized to them. So, and we don't know how it's going to work yet. Maybe that's a chapter for the next institutes, right? But anyway, another little story. We were called to come to Dublin, Georgia, just before COVID hit. And so they told us to bring materials for 25 people. And a few of us went and talked to people about family support and peer supports and such. And so we got there, and there were 75 parents. And I don't know how many children, but more than 75. And everybody was so enthusiastic. And it was it's a lot different from being in the city to being in rural Georgia. And people were enthusiastic about federation chapters and family involvement and youth move and all the other things. So I think the people, the rural persons of Georgia are ready for this, and I'm incredibly excited about the opportunity to be part of it. So that's just about the AIM project. Next.
Next. And so peer support during COVID. It's been a real interesting 18 months or so. And essentially overnight, the department had to pivot from, providing services in person that we had done and traditionally done for so long, to trying to recreate those services in a virtual format through telemedicine. If you're a parent, your child came home on a Friday and didn't return to school on Monday. And so if you had to work, all of that changed. So the world just overnight changed dramatically. And in many cases, some places are still there. In trying to make this transition or pivot for peer support, we were very challenged because going to the virtual format didn't exactly work in the same way that some of the other services were able to kind of make that quick pivot. Trying to recreate that kind of person-centered group supportive environment. In person, like the peers really have to like be open, and there's a lot of crying, there's a lot of hugging. And so in the virtual format, it's hard to recreate that. And so we paused things for a minute to allow the pandemic to pass. But then, after so long, there was no end in sight. We decided that we needed to try to do things and try things in a virtual format, because that was better than having or not supporting peer support at all. Additionally, during that time, just because of providers trying to make the change, or our peer-run organizations, they were laying peers off like other employers were laying off staff. So that was a challenge. We annually hold the Continue Ed during June. And so if you remember, all of this happened in March. And so that threw the Continue Ed off. We were able to hold that in a virtual format led by Sue. I'm sure she'll talk about that in a few minutes, in December. And then the transition of the training work to Georgia Parent Support Network was also impacted and delayed. So it just it was a domino effect that threw some things off. Sue, any reflections?
Oh, there's a lot of reflections. It's been a wild ride. Changes in delivery, and Cameron, stand by, because you're a peer that delivered peer service through the whole thing. So think about what you want to say about what that was like with all the peers.
Okay.
I just think that's important to hear, because he was the person out with the youth. We use Zoom. We came up with not being able to reach parents. We didn't know what to do. We couldn't figure it out. So Lisa Pace, you may know her or not, came up with this amazing idea of having a weekly Zoom meeting with as many parents in Georgia as would sign on. And so we got a guest speaker, and we had somebody 2 to 3 on Tuesday. And then we decided the response was so good. And we didn't hear from just parents. We heard from providers, clubhouses. People were just, at that point, there wasn't nearly as much Zoom as there is now. There is a lot now, but there wasn't then. And so we Zoomed right along every Tuesday since then, and to hundreds of people sometimes. And so that was an adaptation for us to think larger. COVID has brought us some good things and many bad things, but one of the good things was the ability to reach people frequently and easily that haven't been reached before. We hear from lots of people every single week that didn't know there was services. And with this audience or base of people we've been able to collect, we can get a lot of information. We hook them up with websites. We hook them up with specialty services. We hook them up with other advocacy organizations. So the people that are coming are not just necessarily people who would seek us out, but they're people looking for general knowledge, and we're able to get a lot of that out there. So that has been one of the good things about of COVID and the effects. The bad thing is we miss the face-to-face contact. All of us do. We miss the routine and the ritual of, celebrating birthdays and having celebrations. And I guess I have served or do serve on every organization body that was mentioned here in this presentation. And we have the the directors team. And so the directors team meets once a month, and we're all together, and there's probably more than 50 of us. And I miss seeing everybody. I miss the energy and the strength and the knowledge. So we're missing that. We're adapting by doing an awful lot of things virtually. I want Cameron to talk, if he will, about a couple of things because he has the most direct knowledge. He does ISPs for the peers in our program, and he oversees that process. And he has firsthand experience, because we have a lot of work that goes on directly with the peers, kind of like a drop-in center. And our peers are really missing each other in the interaction, because a lot of what we do is based on peer support and peers supporting each other. And virtually that's harder. Well, Cameron, will you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, ma'am. Well, I know when like the pandemic first happened, like we got that notification that like everything was going to be shut down. Like the first thing came to my mind was like, how we gonna sit here and host group? Because it was like rough. But then, you know, thanks to the internet, we established like different things we can do via, Zoom and other networks, because we tried a couple, but we've seen that Zoom really work. And like the peers, they was trying to find like, it was kind of difficult for them because like at the center, like we would come up and like everybody like hanging together, like, it was basically like a family. And everyone, hung out, played video games, went outside, garden, and did all these like, in-person activities. And it was kind of difficult because, some peers require, that face-to-face time, like, they like being around one another. And one thing we did to try to, smooth things over was, create these different type of groups, like, to try to get everybody involved in things that they would like to do, because we facilitate life skill groups. And that was one of the things we had to do as well, like learn how to facilitate different life skill groups through, virtual, through virtual learning. And one way we would do that was like, just find a YouTube video that was interesting, like not, just looking at words and slides all day. Like it was good to watch, a video of somebody that you can relate to. And for as ISP goes, it wasn't too interesting. Well, mainly from my part, because I have to put in documentation anyway. So like watching them virtually, it would be better because like I would see and get a idea of like what expression they would be giving off, and instead of like just over the phone. And that was one thing that they actually preferred, like doing it, virtual, other than just over the phone, or just since we couldn't be in person with it.
Another thing that was impacted a lot was the peers do community service every month, every year. They choose any project they want and do community service. One of it has been feeding the homeless, stocking the little free libraries. And we tried doing that a couple of times, but as the pandemic got worse, even that was too chancy, because they're not good at staying away from each other when they are together, and they're not too good at wearing masks. So that was a challenge for us. Next. Disparities in mental health equity. I had trouble with this one, the whole subject. If we can't get equity in healthcare, how can we get healthy? This is next step. Every single day, several times a week, I talk to people who cannot get mental health of any kind. So mental health disparity, inequality are words that are kind of far from my mind, because if we read all the statistics of all the people everywhere, only a small percentage get mental health care at all. And a large proportion don't get mental health care. And so equality to me would mean that I would always have somewhere to refer parents and youth to. And the good part about it is, or the better part about it is, with all of the things we've been able to do while we now reach more people, we have been able to involve a lot more families and agencies in actually reading legislation, actually getting involved in thinking about what needs to happen, actually going through the bills with our partners, Voices for Georgia. We now have groups of families that are going through the legislation that's proposed to see what to support and get a family to take on, the possibilities of actually creating mental health equality. And equity. That's one of the better things. We now have a lot more parents involved and more knowledgeable. And we have whole Tuesdays dedicated to how to address mental health and get more people knowledgeable enough to actually advocate for equity and equality. So I'm sure that Dante will have a totally different take and hopefully know more about it than I do. Dante?
Thank you, Sue. I agree with you. There's a lot of different directions you can go on with this one. There's the professional, there's the personal. Sometimes those two things align. So I just kind of made some observations that kind of align, within this subject area. But it's a collective. And so the first thing that came to mind in answering this question, my colleague Jill Mays has a quote in her signature line that I really appreciate. It reads, "Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance." I think it's a wonderful quote, and I've used it in my professional life and my personal life to great success thus far. Earlier, I shared that I often lean on lived experience, more so than the books that I read and trying to get my degrees. And a good friend of mine, colleague, individual long-term recovery, taught me something that has, one of those foundational things, that peers don't want to be integrated in something. Peers want to be included. And the difference between integration is one group assimilates into another group and it tend to lose its identity. Whereas inclusion, that diversity is celebrated. And that group participates with their identity firmly intact. Another thing in terms of trying to be responsive to this area, the department for many years has sponsored training on the class standards for community members, for providers, and there's other things in the works in terms of cultural and linguistic competency training. And then finally, more recently, and something that was different for the department, we partnered in 2018 with the Yale School of Medicine to participate in a recovery-oriented service evaluation role study, for short. Guided by the outcomes of the study, 5 domains in consumer care, particularly in the diverse treatment options domain, several offices at DBHUD collaborated to develop what we call Diversity Works, a cultural and linguistic competency series. So it was about 10 webinars. In the interest of time, I won't read all, the titles or subjects of all 10. I'll just point out 3. They're available. They were recorded. They're available on the website that I listed earlier, dbhtd.ga.gov. But the ones I just mentioned to you, one was focused on the intersection between cultural competency and recovery. One was focused on spirituality, how to effectively incorporate spirituality into a treatment setting. And then one explored cultural competency with race and ethnicity in mind. Next. Here's our contact information. I hope I look forward to answering, or we look forward to answering any questions that you have, and look forward to hearing from you. Next.
So we do have some questions for you. The first one is, are there any national standards for core competencies for youth and parent peer support?
I can try to take that. I'm not aware of any. I'm aware of there's a lot of efforts underway. There is the national TA focused on peer support work that is evolving. There is Youth Move. In terms of national standards, I'm not sure if there are any. We borrow from a lot of places over the years. But I'm not sure if they're outside of what we've developed in Georgia, looking at other states or looking at things nationally or through learnings.
I don't think that I've heard of any national standards.
Okay, thank you. Here's the second question. Have other states used or adapted your curriculum and training process? And are you able to provide consultation or supports to other states who are doing this?
I joined the department in 2016. In that time, no other states have adapted our curriculum, I don't think. There was one that reached out, but their timeline was pretty short, and I think they ended up going in a different direction. We do have colleagues that have, been around for many years. Wendy White-Ty Green, Dana McQuarrie, Sue, in their personal capacities, I do know have supported other states in their learning efforts.
That is correct. And for those who are going to say billing, Wendy's pretty much the guru on that one.
Here's the next question. I see you have peer support in hospital emergency rooms to help in crisis situations. Are peers involved in any mobile crisis teams or other types of crisis interventions in your community?
Yes, mobile crisis. So Georgia operates a statewide mobile crisis service, and peers are included as team members on those mobile crisis teams. About 2 years ago, we re-procured that service, and in the current version of it, we added peers as team members. They weren't previously a part of the teams.
The next question is, starting at what age do you find that young people benefit from youth peer support services?
I could answer that. Well, I mean, it really, like, I feel like any youth can really benefit from the services, because like it's like it's undocumented, like youth that that have challenges, but it's all like for as youth correlating with stories, and some may have went through the same type of problems or went through different problems, but sometimes like helping and telling your story and trying to understand where that youth is coming from, you can correlate, and that's how like helping comes about. Like, so it really doesn't have an age to it in receiving help.
And having done some variation through our peer support center, I would say that we often have people bring youth to us that are younger than our stated years of service, saying, please let another youth talk to them, particularly relatives that have seen someone do really well. And we try to do that. And then, even to the extent of supporting the youth kind of informally, if giving the parents or the parenting support system information on how they can help and stabilize the situation.
Thank you. And here's the last question. Where would you categorize your program as it relates to Roger Hart's ladder of youth participation? The ladder goes from tokenism, youth-informed, consulted to youth-driven.
I'll give a stab at that one. And I'm sure it's not consistent everywhere, all over the state of Georgia or in every program. But for instance, DBHDD doesn't do anything related to families and children without the families and youth they have hired as part of the consulting group. And then they bring in outside groups that are not their employees to be part of that consulting group. I would say that, 30 years ago, I would have never thought that we could reach the absolute involvement point that we are now. Probably not consistent statewide, but in dealing with South Georgia and the AIM project, it's exactly the same. They are very fast on the track to having youth and families at every table with a full voice. So I think we're well on our way. And as far as private communities or providers, I would say that we, again, light years ahead of anywhere else I've seen, because after having this absolutely close relationship as we built everything you've heard about today, at all the tables, you know, the IDT, the GRI, all these people always have families in numbers. Our mental health block grant. So I think we come to the point where it's kind of expected. And I think in the more rural areas where everybody isn't, you know, here in the city, I think that's really going forward with leaps and bounds. Dante, you want to?
Yes, thank you, Sue. I concur with that. I'll just say I agree. It may not be consistent throughout the state, but at the department, I mean, we have young people on staff with lived experience. Probably the longest tenure was hired at 18. She's now about 25, 26. At the IDT that we mentioned earlier, we have GPS10 participates in that, and young adults who helped to create a youth navigation guide. Even today is Children's Mental Health Awareness Day in Georgia. Sue in Georgia Parent Support Network hosted that, as they do every year. Cameron had a segment that he did from his couch, which was pretty cool. But the group talked about this is what we need. This is what we find supportive. This is how to talk to us. We listen and we try to incorporate those things in policies, programs, but they walk with us each step of the way.
Okay, and we did have one last question come in. Are you able to provide consultation to other family support organizations?
We do it all the time.
Okay, thank you. I just want to take a moment to thank our outstanding presenters, Sue Smith, Dante McKay, and Cameron Cochran, for sharing their expertise and strategies with us today. And thank you to our interpreters, Jacqueline and Juliana. And thanks to all of you for joining this segment of Training Institutes Live. We would also very much appreciate your taking a few moments to complete the evaluation for this workshop using the link that is posted in the chat. We take your feedback seriously, and it will help us to shape the upcoming workshops in this series. Again, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you on the first Thursday of every month for Training Institutes Live.